Thank you very much, Julian. It's my pleasure to be joining all the rest of the presenters today. Thank you very much for having me. As Julian mentioned, my name is Matthew Schwab. I am the current president and CEO of Kraken Energy Corp. We currently trade on the CSE, the OTCQB, and very recently on the FSE as well. Kraken Energy is a junior uranium exploration and development company, and for the time being, we are solely focused on the U.S. market and U.S. assets, high-grade uranium U.S. assets. As I'm sure many people in the crowd are aware, over the past few years, we have seen more or less nearly unprecedented growing demand for uranium around the world. But in line with that, we're seeing a growing deficit as production around the world cannot keep up with the growing needs. Currently, some projections are expecting a deficit of up to 150 to 200 million pounds annually within 5 to 10 years. But something that a lot of people do not expect is that the United States is actually one of the largest or most drastic cases of that deficit going forward. Currently speaking, the US requires anywhere from 35 to 65 million pounds annually to power its current fleet of 90 plus reactors. But in contrast to that, over the past decade, domestic uranium production has fallen to a point of only being around 5 to 10,000 pounds per year in the United States. Historically speaking, that gap has been bridged by imports coming from countries such as Russia, Kazakhstan, and Canada. But as we move forward, the continued pressure that is being put in place to put in place sanctions that will completely eliminate enriched uranium coming from Russia, as well as Canada and Kazakhstan continually signing long-term supply contracts overseas, really puts the U.S. in a very serious situation of not being able to provide energy security for its growing needs moving forward. With that being said, Kraken Energy, I feel, is very well situated with 4 high-grade uranium assets in the United States, 3 in Nevada, 1 in Utah. And I do like to point out that the 3 assets in Nevada are past producers, which were shut down before reaching their prime. For anybody unfamiliar with the history of uranium production in the United States, it was really kicked off back in the 1950s when the AEC, or the Atomic Energy Commission, was offering incentives for the discovery and production of uranium domestically. But when those incentives were taken away at the end of the 1950s, those projects were more or less abandoned overnight, with reserves still in place and advanced infrastructure across those projects. That gave us a very unique opportunity to essentially cherry pick as we built up the portfolio that we have in place now for Kraken Energy. Currently, we're only looking at tier 1 mining jurisdictions, being Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming, as we continue to look at new project generation and build up the portfolio that we have. And of course, we're only looking for regionally high grades with uranium. So another educational point for anybody unfamiliar, the average worldwide mining grade for uranium is 0.1%. It's only that high because of the phenomenal grades that come out of the Athabasca Basin with scenarios such as Cigar Lake with an average mining grade of 20%. But keep in mind that there are very profitable mines around the world with an average mining grade of 0.02%. So anytime we see 0.1% or better, that's something to be excited about. So looking at our projects in the United States, we have average historic mining grades up to 0.25%, surface samples up to 6% U3O8, which is phenomenal. And across our 4 properties, we have a largest mineralized strike length on surface of 17.5 kilometers at our Apex property. I did mention we have significant infrastructure in place. All of our properties are road accessible to and throughout the properties and do have access to water and electricity despite being in the deserts of Nevada and Utah. Another thing that we're very focused on is building up the value for our properties through the economic potential of other commodities of interest. In Nevada, we have significant potential for gold, silver, copper, nickel, and molybdenum. And our newest addition to the portfolio in Utah, we have a significant potential for vanadium as well. And what I really think brings all of this together is the experienced team that we have in place to give us the best possible chance of making the strategic goals of our company a reality. Looking at the strategic goal of the company, it is quite simple. It is to put in place a realistic and reliable hub-and-spoke mining model for domestic uranium production in the United States. Currently, we see our 2 flagship properties, Harts Point in Utah and Apex in Nevada, as having the potential to serve as the hub of that model as we continually go through that project generation model, looking at satellite projects to bring them in to build out the larger scope of that model as we move forward. Just looking at the team that we have in place, I mentioned that previously. Myself, I've been in the industry for about 15 years now. I've been part of several very successful uranium companies in the past. I was part of the development team at Hathor Exploration, a company that was noted for the discovery of the Rough Rider deposit in northern Saskatchewan. We sold that company to Rio Tinto back in early 2012 for $650 million. Spent a bit of time at Rio Tinto as well before moving on to NextGen Energy as the third employee of the company. I was the senior exploration geologist at the time of targeting and discovery of the Arrow deposit, another significant milestone in my career. Since then, I've gone on to start 7 total companies in my career, very successful, smaller consulting firms for the most part. Besides that, Garrett Ainsworth, our chairman, very noted for the discovery of the R uranium deposit in northern Saskatchewan. He currently sits as the president and CEO of District Metals, looking to build out uranium reserves overseas in Sweden. And we keep moving forward, building our team as best as we can with experienced professionals. But what I like people to take away from this slide is that we really do cover the entire spectrum of experience, from greenfields exploration through multiple major discoveries, permitting feasibility, mine development, all the way through to mine operations. And I do think that's very important for a company at the stage that we're at to have the best possible chance of achieving our strategic goals. Looking at the properties that we have in place, as I said, 3 in Nevada, 1 in Utah, nicely spread geographically across them, all with their own merits. And I will step through those one by one in the next slide, starting with Harts Point. So Harts Point is the newest addition to our company's portfolio. It's centered right in the middle of the Colorado Plateau. We like to call the Colorado Plateau the Athabasca Basin of the United States, as it has produced almost 600 million pounds of uranium since the 1950s. Beyond that, Harts Point is only 30 kilometers to the west of the Lisbon Valley anticline, which is a direct geological analog between the two. Lisbon Valley produced almost 80 million pounds of that 590 million pounds of production, all the way up until 1989 at an average grade of 0.3% U3O8. Beyond that, we're only 64 kilometers north by road of the White Mesa Uranium Mill, which is the only operating conventional uranium mill in the United States currently. Zooming in a little bit closer, just to the west of our property, another 300,000 pounds of uranium was produced, also at an average grade of 0.3%. And the very interesting point here being is that the production to the west of the property and the production at Lisbon Valley, 30 kilometers to the east, was produced within what's called the Shinli Sandstone Formation. On our property, we have 3 historic oil wells intersecting the Shinli Formation at 400 meters depth that show off-scale radioactivity through the entire thickness of the formation. That's spread across a strike length of 5 kilometers. Beyond that, just to the west of the property, again, where that historic production of 300,000 pounds occurred, we actually had the pleasure of visiting the property, going out there this last summer, myself, my chairman, and our VP Exploration, and exposed at the bottom of the canyon wall is the Shinli Formation. And to our pleasure, we walked out there with our scintillometers, and within moments of reaching that exposed formation, our scintillometers were screaming at 40,000 CPS. So this is probably the most de-risked exploration project I've ever had the pleasure of taking part in. We will be mobilizing to this property in the next 7 to 10 days. Very excited to get out there and really realize the upside potential of this property as we move forward. We are permitted, are fully permitted to move forward, and we look forward to the results coming out very soon for this property. Looking at our Nevada assets right now, Apex was the original flagship of the company for great reasons. It was the largest past producer of uranium in the state of Nevada at an average grade of 0.25%. And we do have recent surface samples up to 6% U3O8 on the property. Garfield Hills, we wrapped up our maiden drilling program on that property early in 2023. Very encouraging results, and we're very much looking forward to planning a phase 2 drilling program on that property later in 2024. And Huber Hills, last but not least, it's the smallest of our properties up on the north end of Nevada, but it was Elko County's largest uranium producer at an average grade of 0.24% as well. Looking at Apex, it's very nicely situated, 3 hours southwest of Elko, Nevada, 3 hours east of Reno, Nevada, and only 5 kilometers south of the small town of Austin, Nevada, which serves as a perfect logistical base for the property. The property sits at a little over 6,000 hectares right now. It is 100% owned, except for a small NSR on 4 or 5 claims on the property, right centered around the Apex mine. It does have access across the property, road access, and does have access to electricity and water. And here's just a snapshot of the historic recognition for the property. As I mentioned, it was responsible for 50% of the historic output for uranium in the state of Nevada. produced about 106,000 pounds, but as I stated before, it really was shut down before meeting its prime. There is a non-compliant resource on this property. The only reason it's non-compliant is because we did not have 43-101 standards back in the 1950s. But that non-compliant resource is really based off of the results that you can see in this page right here, looking at results such as 3 meters at 1.3%, 34 meters up to 0.4%, and 15 meters up to 0.5%. That really gives justification to quickly start building out a resource, especially considering it starts near or at surface across the historic Apex mine. We do have line of sight to have our drill permit in hand for Q2 of this year. Initial focus will be to get out there and bring this into a closer to compliant state and use that reserve as the baseline to move forward with more advanced exploration across the rest of the property. Looking at advanced exploration on the Apex property, what you see here on the right-hand side of the slide is the VTEM survey that we completed at the end of 2022. The reason that we did this survey or flew this survey is because at the historic Apex mine on the northwest side of the property and the historically producing Lowboy mine on the southeast side of the property, we see a very distinct graphitic and sulfidic alteration zone directly correlated with the uranium mineralization at both sites. We wanted to see if that geologic horizon continued across the property. And as you can see in the map there, that contact between the Austin Pluton and the Jurassic metasediments, which creates the mineralized pathway, does extend across the entire 17.5-kilometer trend on the property. Beyond that, we've spent some time and gone out and done airborne radiometric surveying as well as ground prospecting, and we do have confirmed radon anomalies, radiometric anomalies from airborne surveying, and surface prospecting with assay results showing mineralization confirmed across that entire 17.5-kilometer trend. I did mention that we are focused on the additional economic potential of other commodities of interest on our properties, and Apex is a perfect example. It actually started off its life back in the 1930s as a silver mine with grades of up to 7,300 grams per ton. More recently, we've seen grades in gold of up to 15 grams per ton on the property as well. But the really important point here is the continuity of uranium mineralization. We're back in the late 1950s, a 250-ton bulk sample was taken out of Adit 2 at the Apex mine, which averaged over 0.7% U3O8. So in summary on Apex, really the positives for this property are sometimes overwhelming. So we are very excited to finally have line of sight and confirmation that we will have drill permit in hand by Q2 of this year to move forward aggressively with exploration on this property. Looking at Garfield Hills, 2.5 hours southeast of Reno, Nevada, and only 12 kilometers east of the small city of Hawthorne, Nevada. Again, perfect logistical base for the property. Property sits a little over 1,100 hectares right now and is very easily accessed by road, as you can see on the map right there. It does have access to electricity and water. There is a 2% NSR on this property, but 50% of that can be purchased back for a one-time cash payment. Here's just a look at some of the results coming off this property, both recently and historically. We're seeing grades in drill core between 0.036 and up to 0.26% U3O8 over up to 14-meter intervals, so very encouraging to follow up on. But in my opinion, as a geologist, I'm more excited about the recent surface sampling that we've done on the property. Across all of the projects that I've ever worked on in my career, I have never seen a soil sample come back at over 1% U3O8. For a bit of perspective on that, when we're typically doing soil sampling for uranium, 100 ppm is something to be excited about and justify further exploration. 1,000 ppm is typically enough to justify a drill hole, and we're seeing up to 10,000 ppm on surface in soils on this property. So admittedly, we do have to understand the geology a little bit better before we plan that phase 2 drilling program, but we're very excited to get out there and do that in 2024. What you can see here on the left-hand side is just a cross-section through the area of our maiden drilling program in early 2023, where you can see those continuous zones of mineralization starting near or at surface. On the right-hand side, you can see what is one of the baseline surveys that we fly on almost all of our properties. It's an airborne radiometric survey, where you can see in the yellows, oranges, and reds, the surface expression of radioactivity is picked up by an airborne scintillometer. The dots that you can see across the map are where our team has actually gone out and ground truthed those anomalies with a handheld spectrometer, which differentiates between uranium, potassium, and thorium. To our delight, we picked up 4 additional target areas on this property with elevated uranium, and that's where we came across that 1% soil sample that you can see in this map right here. So All in all, for our first round of exploration at Garfield Hills, what we have now is a confirmed 4.5 kilometer strike length on surface of confirmed mineralization between 0.164 and over 1% U3O8. So we will spend some time getting back out there this summer to, as I said, better understand the geology on this property, and then look to put in place a phase 2 drilling program later this year to really follow up on the results that we've seen so far. Looking at Huber Hills, again, last but not least, on the company's portfolio, it is the smallest of the properties in our portfolio, as I mentioned, a little over 300 hectares right now, but it does encompass the historic racetrack open pit mine, which was a producer back in the early 1960s at an average grade of 0.24%. The best sample that we took off of this in our very brief prospecting last year was a surface sample of 0.237%. Back in 2007, a little bit more exploration was done where two 4.5 meter channel samples were taken. It came back at 0.102 and 0.149% U3O8. This property is 100% owned as it was a staking opportunity and not an acquisition, so it provides great valuation for the company. There is no NSR. And we do have road access throughout the property as well as close access to electricity and water as well. There's just a snapshot of the 4 properties that we have right now in the United States and the progress that we've made. As I said, Garfield Hills, we did finish up that main drilling program in early 2023 with very encouraging results, and we're really looking forward to getting out there with a phase 2 drilling program later in 2024. Apex, it's been a long wait for our shareholders, over 2 years now, unfortunately, to get that drilling permit in place to drill around the historic Apex mine. Now that we do have a line of sight to have that in hand by Q2 of this year, we're very excited to get out there and really start realizing some valuation on this property as we explore it more aggressively. Huber Hills, a little bit earlier stage, as I mentioned, we do have some baseline radiometric magnetic surveys and prospecting to do to really understand the geology. And we do hope to have in place a phase 1 drilling program later in 2024 as well. And then the immediate focus of the company right now, as I said, we do plan to mobilize within the next week or two to this property, fully permitted to move forward. And we're very excited to really start looking at this, as I said, the most de-risked exploration project I've ever been part of as we recommence phase 1 drilling here in the next 2 weeks. There's just a snapshot of the current capital structure of the company. We've definitely been subject to a bit of a slide over the past few weeks here, currently trading a little over 10 cents. Very clean share structure, though, with only 58 million shares outstanding. Currently, we sit with a little under $3 million in the treasury, so we're fully funded for exploration moving forward with a bit of reserve in the bank as well. Right now, we have about 60 to 70% retail shareholding, with 20-ish% held by management and close insiders. So very clean structure moving forward and very well positioned to start maximizing value for the company. In summary, I think one point that I'd like to highlight is that now, after a year and a half with the company being at the helm, I am more confident in the potential of our properties and the fact that we will be successful moving forward with exploration on them than I was when I signed on with the company. We have great assets with high-grade uranium potential, very extensive infrastructure in place on those properties to help us move forward with not just permitting, but exploration as we bring these to being in a mine-ready state. We will focus very heavily on the additional economic potential of those other commodities of interest. As I said, with grades of up to 7,300 grams per ton silver, 15 grams per ton gold, and very significant potential for vanadium, molybdenum, and nickel as well. We do have a very good situation relying on that growing deficit in the United States. And I do think that we have the best team possible in place to maximize our chances of success as we move forward as a company. So I think I wrapped that up a little bit sooner than expected, but I'm happy to open it up to questions to wrap up the rest of the presentation.
Well, all good, Matthew. Thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, a little quick. We have 9 minutes, but that's all good and fair. So anyone who has a question, any listeners or viewers, please write it in the Q&A right now. I want to bring you on directly boots on the ground.
Absolutely.
In Europe, there are some frictions with obviously nuclear power. Some nations like it, some nations don't like it. Some nation enforce it. Some nation again completely banish it. How is it on the ground? You go there. Is there any problem for the people to work there? Is there any radioactivity? Every time we hear uranium, we think of that gluey Simpson, kind of greenish, flashy stuff, and then everyone's gonna die, and they think that you guys are going there with like you would explore the deep sea of Jules Verne's book. I mean, what is it exactly, and what's the security on the ground in that regard?
That's a very broad question, but I appreciate it, Julian. Social misconception is a huge part of what we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And unfortunately, it has come from a history of tragic events that were 100% avoidable, completely avoidable due to human error. But technology has advanced so much over the years that it's come to a point where those tragedies that happened are almost not possible, to be quite honest. But the problem that we face is the legacy of what was left behind from a lot of the operations in uranium across the world, especially in the southwestern United States. Back in the 1950s and 60s, we did not have the same environmental protocols that we have in place today, requiring us to clean up the messes behind us and make sure that we're ensuring public safety moving forward and that we bring our projects back to the state that we found them in. I've experienced that in multiple countries, actually around the world. I've worked in Canada, the United States, Africa, Asia. I've worked everywhere. And the one thing that I've brought back is that I take personal pride in visiting every community that we will operate in. I talk with the stakeholders, I talk with the people that are going to be affected by our operations, and I get their feedback. And I've been pleasantly surprised that we have phenomenal support in the southwestern United States right now, especially Nevada and Utah. The people that I've talked to, they want us to be there. They want the operations to be in place, provided that we are taking the right environmental steps to make sure that we're leaving it in the same state we find it. So yes, it's a struggle. It's continuous, and yes, The Simpsons definitely skews people's point of views across the board. But I think we're very well positioned by the fact that we are taking the most stringent environmental protocols possible for uranium that were developed in the Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan, where we see grades of up to 90% U3O8. And we are applying those to our projects in the United States to really get ahead of the curve and make sure we're doing things properly.
Perfect. That's reassuring for everyone. And specifically, when you guys go and exploring, do you have to wear any special suit, anything, or just exploration like any other project?
It really comes down to common sense. And this is an educational point that most people don't understand is that uranium actually isn't that dangerous unless it gets inside your body. So when we approach a project, no, with the grades that we're looking at, we don't have to wear any special suits. We don't have to go, over and above to make sure that our personnel are protected. We just have to make sure that people aren't eating around the uranium, around the core. They're not smoking while they're working. And again, this comes down to common sense. When you're looking at the Athabasca Basin, where you're working around 90+% U3O8, yes, yeah, typically we wear lead-lined vests when we're doing splitting of the core, that kind of thing. But I spent almost a decade working up there, and I've got 5 healthy children, so
Well then maybe we should ask a question about your personal health rather than your kids' one, but that's going to be for the next month. GDPR in
fair enough.
Europe just ask us to stop on that. No, but thank you for the answer. I think it's just it has to be tackled, right away. It has to be discussed, and very happy that you're doing it. We have a few questions that also came in now. Will the 3 million treasury fund both Apex and Hearts point drilling this year?
Yes, so we expect less than 1 million burn for the drilling at Harts Point for the initial maiden program. And we expect about the same for Apex. So we are fully funded for the drilling at both properties moving forward into early 2024. Yes, yeah, I'm sure you can all see the writing on the wall following those two. Based on some results, we will probably have to do a capital raise. But for the time being, we're very well situated and we're ready to move forward with both properties.
Okay, and we have another question from Steve. Steve is asking, how are the relations coming along with the locals groups around Hearts Point?
There's a bit of apprehension, largely because we're so close to New Mexico, and New Mexico, as many of you I'm sure know, is very opposed to uranium, again, due to the legacy left behind from the 1950s and how things were left with water contamination, open mining sites, etc. But we're approaching it as best as we can. And like I said, I take personal pride in visiting those communities and speaking with the locals to make sure that we're addressing their concerns as we move forward. So we're fully permitted. We will follow those permit guidelines to the letter of the law to make sure that we do not overstep, not only so that we can continue moving forward, but so that we can ensure environmental protection as we go ahead.
Perfect. Delwyn is asking, and I hope you have an answer for that. That would mean that you can predict the market very, very easily. What are the near-term catalysts that will re-rate the stock? What does success look like?
You know, honestly, I think what our shareholders have been waiting for a long time is that we just move forward with exploration. It's been a long wait because the initial promises made by the previous executives of the company was that Apex would have been drilled almost 2 years ago. Unfortunately, permitting on U.S. Forest Service ground is not as easy as they initially thought. But now that we do have permits in place for Harts Point, we have line of sight for permits at Apex. I really do think that as soon as we get some uranium assays coming out of both projects moving forward in the next 3 to 4 months, that will change the way that our stock has been trading, bring us back to where we should be, and really start rebuilding valuation for the company.
Okay, perfect. So if anyone has any other questions, we do still have 2 minutes. I will continue with one more. Can you discuss a company's long-term vision for its uranium exploration and development activities? So basically, you do have a lot of properties. You do have very, very interesting properties. What's the pathway forward?
As I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, you know, I've been part of starting 7 companies up to this point in my career. I'm not a mine builder. I'm not a mine engineer. I create valuation for early stage companies. That's what I do. It's what I'm good at. Our goal is to bring our properties, not just the 4 that we have, but as we continue for project generation, bring our properties into a mine-ready state and have those ready for production. I don't foresee us becoming a producer. I see us building value to create an acquisition opportunity for the other mid-tier and major companies out there as they continue to bring their properties back into production as the uranium price increases. Again, they need to restock their shelves, right? They need assets that have high potential, have reserves in place, and are ready to bring into production. And that's the point of what we're doing with our company.
Well, this is great to hear. I personally know at least 3 companies, successful one that you were involved in, and they were all of them, obviously the 3 of them successful. So I'm very eager to see where you guys are going to take this one too. I think you're taking it at the lowest point. So it's actually a very, very great moment for any investor that are doing their due diligence, that are interested in uranium, to look at, and especially at the proven management team that didn't do it once or twice, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe 7 times in a row. And usually maybe you can get lucky once or 2, but times in a row. But if it's 7 in a row, then usually it tells something about management. So on that, Matthew, the time is up. I thank you very much for joining us for your first time at the IIF, and we'll be very much looking forward into following your story and your success.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the vote of confidence, and I look forward to presenting for you again. Have a great
Perfect.
day.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Bye-bye.